We're good. All right. If I had one of those things, I go 3, 2, 1, action. All
Yeah.
right. Hey, thanks everyone. Been really excited about this. The, my guest today is somebody who, man, I've been familiar with you in some way or other since probably the mid '80s. Probably when you hit Simmons, because I remember that. And I'm gonna do a very brief introduction. My guest is someone who I would consider to be, first of all, one of a kind in many ways, but especially when it comes to being an anchor for the brotherhood of the drum community out there. He holds us together, whether we personally know him or not, and he does so much for us. And so it's my pleasure to introduce my guest, John DeChristopher. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great, Carl. How are you, man?
Oh, good. It's everything is good. So great
Good.
to meet you face to face here.
Likewise.
Great to talk. And
And thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. I was honored that you asked me to do this. So pardon my dry throat.
no, no problem. Um, oh yeah, man. I mean, you've had a really, I mean, in my eyes, and of course in the eyes of many others, like, man, this guy's had one heck of a cool career. And I mean, you are a drummer as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you get to deal with drummers. You got to be in relations with was it like artist relations type of thing?
Yeah. That was
It,
what my job at Zildjian was, pretty much 99% of the time. The other jobs that I worked at, you mentioned Simmons,
Mhm.
which was my first job in the industry. I'd worked retail for about 5 years before that and sort of graduated into the drum industry. But I moved out to California in 1985 in the summer and to be a drummer, to pursue playing. But I sort of had this relationship with the man that was running Simmons in America, Glenn Thomas.
Okay.
Excuse me. I had this relationship with him sort of in my back pocket.
Uh-huh.
And that was my sort of ace. And that when I got out to LA, if I had a job sort of waiting for me, thanks to Glenn. And like a lot of people, I was 24 years old, and my mindset was, well, I'm going to be a drummer. I'm going to pursue being in a band or whatever it takes to sort of
Excuse me.
be a pro drummer. And but I've got this day job to pay my bills and to kind of keep me going. And so I did do that. I mean, I did pursue the drumming part of it for a while out there, but um, there are a lot of drummers in Los Angeles. Who knew?
I remember talking with Peter Erskine one day, early '80s. He had moved from New York back out there, and he told me in a conversation. He says, "Just want you to know," and he was, of course, kind of busting my chops, but also like letting me know great drummers are a dime a dozen out here. He says it's not hard to find one. I wasn't
Yeah.
really planning on go there, although I mentioned it, and I ended up moving to Chicago instead. So yeah, wow,
No, that's it's a dream that a lot of people have, and I've been asked by people over the years, do you think it's a good idea? And I'm honest about it, in terms of like the realities of what it takes and what it's like when you go out there trying to pursue music. And I would encourage anybody, absolutely follow your dreams, but definitely have a backup plan. Have a plan B. I
yeah,
was lucky that I had that. I was lucky that I could sort of go out there and really not know that if not feel that I was going to be a failure. One way or
sure,
another, I had something waiting for me, so to speak.
right. We need to pay our bills. We need to do things. So Plan B is such a good idea,
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
it's really important. I'm glad you gave that kind of advice too, because it's really important to be realistic about life.
yeah,
It's seldom do we ever plunge into our dream situation right away, and it may never get there exactly the way we want, or it may take time. So got to get there somehow. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, and I think back to that too. I mean, I was 24 years old, and I thank God that I was I had an ounce of common sense, or, reality in my brain at that time that I realized that, um, to sort of go out there with everything I owned in a van. um, I just recently gotten married, and so we both moved out there, and my first wife and myself, but we really, I will say that we were under no illusions of like, we're gonna hit stardom, um, overnight. We knew there were risks, and we knew there was a lot to it, um, and I'll say that over time, the job at Simmons was great, and I met so many great people that I worked with there,
Mm-hmm.
plus all the drummers that I idolized as a kid, that all lived out in Los Angeles, all lived in, within a
Wow,
20-mile radius, it seemed. So,
that's
I
cool.
yeah, and I immediately became friends with guys like Greg Bissonette, and
Oh yeah.
Myron Grombacher. These guys are my friends. They
Oh,
Greg was part of a surprise Zoom birthday party that my family threw for me,
oh, that's
and,
cool.
and played the Beatles' birthday on his drums for me and sang it.
Oh wow, man. It's funny. I'm just going to interject for 1 second. I only saw Greg one time. It's a little over 20 years ago at a clinic here in Syracuse, and we got to meet him. My son and I got to meet him and just hang out for a little, and he was so much fun.
Oh,
And just
yeah,
you could tell by the energy. First of all, he played his butt off, and he told us how much he admires Ringo and why. And of course, at that time, I didn't really understand until he explained why. And
yeah.
then he played, what's that?
Oh, come together. Yeah,
Yeah, so he played that, and I think he might have sang some too. And after that explanation, I started to understand the Beatles a little more, because I went backwards. I started with fusion and tried to go back into bebop and all that, and I had a hard time. It took a long time. Same thing with listening to whoever, going back, finally understanding the Beatles to some degree. I still don't quite understand, but I really appreciate them. And so the
sure.
bottom
Yeah,
line is, on a typical Carl tangent, although I'm learning to manage my tangents, is to come back and say Greg is so cool and his energy is so awesome.
yeah,
What a
yeah.
great
He
energy.
great energy, and from the first day I met him, and this was like in the summer of '85. It was almost a year before he had the David Lee Roth gig, so he was not a famous drummer yet.
Hmm.
And he came to Simmons along with Myron Grombacher, who was a famous drummer, who was Pat
Oh,
Benatar's
Pat
drummer.
Benatar, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Myron, I got to know Myron first, and um, he was a big hero of mine at the time, and so Myron, typical Myron. Hey, you got to meet my friend Greg. He's a monster drummer, man. You got to check him out. And Greg, I think the first day we met, we started talking about the Beatles, and he loved the fact that I was such a Beatles fan and Ringo fan, and
Hmm.
we just got into this conversation, and then they'd come in every few weeks or whatever. We'd hang out a little bit,
Hmm.
and then Greg got the gig with David Lee Roth, and he
Oh,
came to Simmons and played us a cassette tape
excuse me.
of a rehearsal, or a recording that he'd made with the band, and it was on the down low. He's like, I think it was the first record, I guess it was some demos. And he said,
Hmm.
you can't let anybody know that. I mean, it's 35 years ago now, so I can divulge this, but
Hmm.
he said, you can't tell anybody I played this. And I mean, and he wasn't being dramatic. I mean, they had really tight management in those days,
Hmm.
and the whole Van Halen David Lee Roth thing was bad. You know what I mean? The whole rivalry. So
Sure, yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah.
but Greg was just this down to earth great guy who hasn't changed one bit over the years. And um, we could spend the whole day talking about Greg. So um,
That's cool though. So,
yeah.
how long were you at Simmons?
Not long, really. I was there a year and a few months. I was there
Mhm.
from like July of '85 until um, November of '86.
Okay.
And the way that came about was so in that time, Carl, so by the sort of summer of 1986, things were changing quite a bit at Simmons, in that Yamaha had come to market with an electronic drum kit. Roland had come to market with an electronic drum kit.
Right.
And, there's a lot of competition. And the market itself was kind of shrinking. I think it had sort of peaked in terms of how many people were going to go out and buy an electronic drum set, and you're starting to see a trend toward acoustic drum sets again.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just turned on MTV in those days, you'd see Motley Crue and you'd see Poison and Rat and all these bands, Sunset Strip bands, all playing double bass acoustic drum sets.
Right.
So the electronic thing was starting to kind of slow down. And I got a phone call one night from Don Lombardi, who is the founder of Drum Workshop, DW Drums.
Yeah.
And I'd met Don in Los Angeles at a clinic somewhere, I think West LA Music, when that was still in business, of course, and had a friendly relationship with Don just from, hanging around, seeing him around LA. And sorry, I'm so dry here.
No, don't worry. I'm part of my Kleenex. It's post-COVID stuff.
I know,
on.
man. We should talk about that too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share.
But sorry, I got this phone call from Don one night, and he, we started talking, and he was telling me that he was going to move forward with introducing DW drums. At that time, of course, they were just not just, but they were the foot pedal, hardware company, hi-hat stand.
Yeah.
And they were most known for being, the sort of top of the line bass drum pedal company.
I remember that. I actually had one too.
Yeah.
I
did
a few.
too.
Yeah. Still do, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
And they were like the originator of they took the Camco design and perfected it. So so anyway, he was looking to get someone to run their sales department and artist relations program, a small operation, and to start off, and would I be interested in coming up and seeing the facility and thinking about it. So I said, sure, I'll come up and meet with you. And I went up and met with him, and I liked what I saw, and I liked Don, and they were located in Newbury Park in those days, which is just 20 minutes up the road from where Simmons was.
Okay.
So I went up after work one night, and and over the next week or so, Don and I sort of worked out the business side of it, and I decided to take the job. I mean, it was, I should say, at the same time we found out we were expecting my son, who was born in May of 1987. This was in like September of 86 that I had this meeting with Don.
My son was born right around in April 87.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah,
All right.
1 month apart. Cool. Yeah.
That's cool. Boy, I can't believe it's been that long too, coming up on.
I can't either. It's going to be 34 this year. What the heck? I'm going to be 60. I mean, what the heck's going on?
60. Well,
yeah. And I'm just checking here, by the way. So you are visible on your page. This is going.
Oh, great.
Oh,
good.
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's probably why we have the viewers we do. It ain't because of me. It's because of you.
No, that's great. I'm glad we get some folks watching. That's great.
Me too.
I'm gonna.
So your son? Okay, I'm sorry. I interrupted the flow here.
No, that's all right. So I basically accepted the job in like September, October of 86. Okay. And so I had to give my notice to Glenn, which was very difficult, but Glenn, being the great guy that he is, understood that this was a better opportunity and wished me well. So I started working for Don in November of 86, and we launched DW Drums in January of 87 at the NAMM show that year. And it was just Don Lombardi, John Good, myself on the booth, one drum set. I mean, when you look at where DW is today versus back then and how far they've come, and
it's amazing.
Yeah. And so that, that was a great opportunity for me to meet even more people. I see John Ferraro is watching, who's an old friend who I met through working at DW. John's a great drummer. And
hey, John.
Hey, John. Who That's later cool. I signed to Zildjian, when I moved over there a few years later. So, but so yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but I mean, that was like another stepping stone, and I'm still in touch with Don and Chris and John and all the guys there too, and Garrison.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So I have a question. So in the fall of 86, my life changed because, so kind of funny story here. I went to see Chick Corea and the Electric Band because Weckel was newer on the scene, right? He's kind of like the guy. We got to check him out. And I was psyched to see him, and there was an opening band, and I knew that Chad Wackerman was with them. And so I figured, well, it's got to be whoever it is good because Chad's there. So I get to the show and I'm kind of anxious to get through the first hour. Let's get the opening act out of the way, right? Because I'm 25 at the time and everything had to be in a hurry. Alan Holdsworth came out with Jimmy Johnson and Chad. That was it.
Yeah.
Literally, my life changed. In fact, it's funny because I was with, I don't know who was Frank Newbert, maybe Frank Briggs, Joe Jewell, all these people I know. We were I like in the intermission. Oh man, I think I got to go home. I don't want these sounds to leave my head. They said, that's stupid. That's why they make CDs. Go buy CD. Oh, so I went back in, and of course it was great. And I wasn't totally into it, but I loved it. Wecco was on fire. It was beautiful. But going back from this tangent, is it possible that Chad was playing DW in the fall of '86? Because I could swear he had DWs that night.
He absolutely
And
was.
was he like playing them maybe for a little while before that launch in '87 you're talking about?
Yeah, Chad, in fact, I skipped over that part, that when I met with Don that first time at the shop, one night after work, he told me, he said, the only guys right now we have playing our drums are Jim Keltner, Chad Wackerman, and John Hernandez, Johnny Vatos from Oingo Boingo. And they were the guys. And I don't think John Ferraro was on board quite yet, but John, if you were, I apologize. And maybe you were there in '86, but if he wasn't, like John Ferraro and a whole bunch of guys came not long after that. I think Josh Freese was a year or two later, and a handful of guys just started to follow suit. But I met Chad when I was.
Well, I'm sorry, Josh is playing with Sting lately sometimes, right? I hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was going to say I met Josh when I was at Simmons too. He was 12 years old, and
oh my god.
Yeah, but Chad, that's where I met Chad. He was one of the first guys I met working at Simmons. So when and we got to be good friends, and he was using some Simmons stuff when he played with Zappa.
Yeah.
At that time, and but was playing DW drums also. So when I went to work at DW, there was, he was one of the main guys at that time, and we spent a lot of time together. And there was no sort of getting to know you kind of thing there. And yeah, it was a small operation, just a handful of people, endorsers in those days.
That's really interesting. See, I love this stuff because I love music. I love drumming. I love drummers, the brotherhood thing. There's really something special, I think, about the community and the drums themselves and the cymbals and all this stuff. It's a part of our lives.
Yeah.
But to me, the history is very interesting. The history of things. And I remember when Simmons came in. I do you know Frank Briggs?
Sure.
He's an LA
Yep.
based. So I bought his Simmons set just before he moved to LA. So I don't know, maybe 87 or 88. And I had a little Roland Octopad. I don't even know where I got the sounds out from or what I drew them from, but
it was only like 900 maybe.
Could be. I'm not sure if I know if you said it, but and that quickly faded because I remember there was a kind of a fade out of the electronic stuff. And the band I was in, they said at least use an acoustic bass drum. So I always used a real snare, but the toms and the sounds. So, but yeah, it was cool. It was an interesting period of time. It was when I saw Chad, he did have some, and I actually have a bootleg of that concert too. So he had some electronics going on that was really cool.
Yeah, he later DW started distributing Dynacord electronic drums from Germany. So I wasn't just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in, kind of thing. So I was involved in the distribution of Dynacord, and Chad was one of our Dynacord guys. That's kind of how I got to know Jeff Beccaro. He was also a Dynacord. He wasn't. I should rest his soul. I shouldn't imply that Jeff was a big electronics guy. By the time that started happening in the sort of later '80s, I think he was through his electronic drum phase, like a lot of guys were. They just were a little bit burnt out on it. But he had an endorsement set up. The band did, Toto did through Dynacord. So we had a number of conversations about electronic drums and
interesting. It's funny. I remember when Yamaha came out with their kit because a local guy here had he had a set. Oh, actually, Frank Briggs was working at the music store here, and he took me in the back room where he had one set up, and of course he went through his magic and
Was
said,
that
"Holy shit,
was
I
that
can't."
drone sound? You're in Syracuse, right?
Yeah, Drome is.
Or was it, what
I
was the
can't
name of
remember
the?
if that's in Utica or if it's in Rome, which both are within an hour. But he was at DeSantis Music.
DeSantis? Okay, because when I was at Simmons, I didn't deal directly with Frank, but I know that he was known to everybody there, and that's kind of how I got to know him.
He was
And he
with a
was still
band
in New
here,
York.
like still to this day. No offense to any other musicians in my hometown, but 805. They actually had an RCA recording contract for a while, and I think he probably used some Simmons on that. It sounds like, or else they did some crazy mixing in there and changing of sounds. But 805 was just incredible band. They did a lot of their own tunes, but they did some covers, like they would do, Elephant Talk, um, the Bill Bruford, King
Yeah,
Crimson.
King Crimson. Yeah, yeah.
They did some in, I mean, Crimson did it great, but I swear to God, 805 did it almost better. Sorry, Rubber Fripp, I love you. So, and Bill Bruford. But anyways, no, it was really cool. So I went over there to see Frank. So that's the first time I saw the Yamaha electronic kit. And Frank's a really creative guy, and he's always ahead. He's like a leader in the field. And then
Yeah.
Erskine came through in the fall of '86 with Weather Update,
Yes. Yeah.
playing a Yamaha electric kit. It was the only difference there. It was Bobby Thomas, Victor Bailey, Zolano Peter, and Steve Kahn took Wayne's place.
Yeah. Yep.
So that
You
was
know,
the first. It was cool. It was fun.
I remember Peter. And Peter might not remember this, but I didn't really know him. I'd met him at that point. I actually met Peter when I was working at a music store in Boston in 1982. But I
Excuse
met
me.
Peter later when I was at Simmons. He'd come up a few times because he was playing Simmons. But when Yamaha came out with their stuff, and this is a good segue, they kind of, and this is how it works in the business, they sort of pressured their drum set guys to play their electronic kits. So Peter, John Robinson, Rick Murata, um, a whole bunch of big name Yamaha guys, Yamaha drum set guys, had to kind of say to Glenn, "I'm sorry, but I've got to play." I mean, nowadays they probably wouldn't have that kind of muscle, frankly. I think all these drummers would stand up and say, no, we're going to play if we like the Simmons better, we're going to play the Simmons better. And frankly, maybe at that point, the Yamaha stuff might have had an edge on them. The pads might have tracked a little better at that point than the Simmons pads were in those days. But, there was this sort of like catch up period where Yamaha and Roland both came out with right out of the gate with good products, that like the pads felt softer, maybe a little bit touch
Yeah,
more dynamic, and that got a lot of people's attention. But
I remember
it
that.
did
I
it
might
did
have
make
had one of the
waves.
early versions of the Simmons pads, and what's weird? I was thinking about it the other day. I have no idea what I did with them because I don't have them. I must have sold them and just don't remember. But um, and I loved them, but they were hard. They were a
Yeah,
lot of shock coming in, right? No matter how loose your grip was, there was still a lot of repetitive hitting, kind of trauma almost. And then when I played on the Yamahas, it was more forgiving. But then it seemed like I think Simmons came out with another pad that was more forgiving, and that felt better.
they did. Yeah, the
Yeah,
very first Simmons pad, I had some of those too. The SDS5 pads were like tabletops. They were like a Formica
yeah,
surface.
that's true.
It was the material that they used on riot gear and
Yeah.
that the Bobbies use. And then they had a rubber
Wow.
surface later that felt better, and it was velocity sensitive and better dynamics. And
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
but I will say, I made some lifelong friends working at Simmons that I'm still in touch with today, and I'm just so thankful for that time, that opportunity that Glenn gave me. And um, one of my best friends, this guy named Rob Davenport, who works for Huey Lewis and the News now. He's Bill Gibson's drum tech, but he was my direct boss there. He was the sales manager,
Oh,
and we stayed in touch, throughout the years, and a great drummer himself too.
that's really that's really cool. So let's move forward in the
Sure.
timeline. So we got Simmons Drum Workshop. What happened next? And if you hear noise in the background, everybody, I'm sorry. It's my dog. I think maybe doggy dimensions kicking in because she's moving her dish around, and I just fed her, so she's not.
I heard her. I can hear her. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never complain
Doing
about
her
hearing a
thing,
dog in
yeah.
the background.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it
so I took the job.
makes
So
you feel
we
that
talked
way.
about that. We introduced DW
Mhm.
drums in '87, and things started to kind of move along nicely. And
Mhm.
my son was born, as I said, in May of '87, and about a year or so later, by the summer of '88, we were getting a little antsy living in Los Angeles, having been there 3 years, and flying back and forth all the time with my son, just so that he could have some semblance of kind of a family. Kind of,
Yeah.
we had really no family out there in California. So um, my dad came out to visit a bunch of times. My mom came out once or twice, but it's not the same. And by the
No.
time 1988, the end of 1988 rolled along, we were pretty much set on moving back to Boston. And
Mhm.
I didn't want to leave my job at DW, but I just felt like if I have to do that, I will. I'm at the point now, where I just really want to, I kind of wanted to be back home,
So you
back
were
here.
originally then from the Boston area?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Grew up in the Boston area,
All right.
town called Melrose, Mass, which is a little ways north of Boston, about
All right.
7 miles north of Boston. So, but thankfully, Don was open to this idea of me having an East Coast office and having an East Coast presence. The business had grown enough to sort of warrant that idea. So I would work out of the idea is I'll work out of my house, and I can travel to New York and throughout New England, and I can, physically call on dealers that I otherwise wasn't calling on or, seeing. And
Sure.
I can also handle some artist relations duties when people come through town. So it was a great situation. Um, and it worked great for a number. I did that, I guess, moved out there in the later part of 1988.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning of 1989, January of 1989, I was back in LA for the NAMM show. Don brought me back out there. And in the course of my sort of walking around the show and saying hello to old friends, I walked by the Zildjian booth and I said hello to Lenny DiMuzio and Colin Schofield and some other folks. And
Lenny.
Lenny, God rest his soul.
Yeah.
And
an icon.
And yeah, he sure was, sure is still. I mean, he's and but Colin Schofield, who was the head of marketing at that time at Zildjian, who I got to know, he had been living in LA in the 80s. We sort of got to know each other a little bit. Had moved back east to work out of Zildjian's main office in Massachusetts. Approached me and said, "Hey, I heard you're back in Boston now." And I said, "Yeah." I told him what I was doing, and he said, "Do you have a resume?" And I said, "Yeah, I do actually." I pulled a resume out of my bag, and he said, "Well, we're looking at possibly expanding, and your name has come up as someone that we'd be interested in talking to. Is it something you'd be interested in coming down and talking with us about?" And I said, "Well, sure." I said, "Well, what exactly is it?" And he said, "Well, it's, basically, I'd rather wait until you come down to meet with us to tell you what it is." And I said, "Okay, all right, sure." So I got home and from the show, and I think it wasn't long after getting home that we found out we were expecting another child, which turned out to be my daughter in September of '89, which was a nice surprise to come home to.
How old were you? You look like you're 40. Maybe.
I just turned 60 last month.
No way. Oh,
yeah. When you
get
said
out
you're
of here.
turning 60, I just had to laugh. But
you look great, man. So
thank
good
you.
for
So
you.
you.
Good for you.
Come on. Yeah.
I'm trying. You can only see me from here up.
I was just going to say, you're only seeing
during
me from
COVID, I put on a little bit of my sense of smell went away, but my appetite increased. It was bad news. So no, sorry. So in '88, your daughter was born.
89.
89. Okay.
89,
oh, by the way,
September
I just
89.
want to say a shout out to Dave Hanlon. Do you know Dave Hanlon here in Syracuse?
I know that name. Yeah, I sure do.
Dave is an icon here and in many places, Dave, brother, we got to get together when COVID is not so crazy, but he's an icon, man. The guy is I have the honor of having played subbed for him a few times at his band and playing at his son's wedding. I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, right, Dave?
Very cool.
But Dave is a total, pardon my language, a total badass. So thanks for watching, Dave.
Any badass friend of yours is a badass friend of mine.
Yeah, he's, I mean, really, I remember, I'm
Dave.
totally taking you off for a minute, but the first time I saw Dave, he was at a Louis Belson clinic, and I'm guessing early 70s, right, Dave? 73, 74, maybe 72. My dad took me, and, we sat in the front row. We got to hang with Louis, and Dave sat in. Louis knew Dave, and he's like, come on up. And I'm like, what?
He must be a
guy
badass.
who plays like this here. I mean, actually, Dave, you completely messed me up in a great way. So you made me practice, brother. So I'm sorry. So no, thanks, Dave. So 89, your daughter's born. And had you moved back at that point? You moved back to Boston at that point?
I had moved back to Boston at the end of 88. And I kind of jumped ahead just saying that came home from the NAMM show in January of 89 to find out that we were expecting. And then I kind of confused things by saying, and then she was born in September. So anyway, so I come back home from the NAMM show. A week or two later, I get a phone call from Colin to come down to Zildjian to meet. So I drive down there, and basically I'd never been to Zildjian before. Took a tour and really liked what I saw, and
so cool.
We chatted a whole bunch, and basically Colin said to me, so here's the situation. So Lenny is going to we're creating this new part of the business, a completely new division, devoted to education, and Lenny is going to run it. And that made sense. And he said, so we're looking for someone to sort of fill that spot in artist relations. And we know you've had a background in that and through DW. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'm interested. But I said, I'm my main position at DW is sales. And, and I'll share with you at that time. So I'd moved from LA back home to Boston, and Don and I had worked out a situation where I was getting a commission on whatever I sold versus a salaried employee. And so, obviously there was a greater incentive for me to sell with that. And I was very aggressive, and the drums were starting to take off. I was making regular trips down to New York to 48th Street and Sam Ash and also throughout New England. And, drum shops were now starting to carry DW drums, which initially they weren't. They were very expensive, and there were plenty of other drum companies. And that was the sort of answer I got from a lot of people was, we don't really need another line of drums. But as we started signing more artists like Danny Serafin and I mentioned Chad and just more and more guys. Tommy Lee came along not long after that, I think, and Ricky Rocket and some big names at that time were playing DW drums. So the name was getting out, the buzz was getting out. They were great drums, obviously, and that helped. And so I was starting to make some pretty good money. So I wasn't, I wasn't shy about saying, well, I it's got to be worthwhile to me to do this, to move from a situation like this where there's kind of the potential is bottomless pretty much in terms of, what I could earn with another child on the way versus being a salaried employee. So we sort of went back and forth, and the next step was, before we sort of got ahead of our skis, was for me to come back and meet Armin Zildjian and make sure that I passed that, litmus test. So I got another call, I don't know when, a week or two later. And I've told this story before, and anybody who's listening, I apologize if it's boring to hear it again. But in the meantime, okay, well, I'll tell you. So in the meantime, I had gotten a phone call from a guy named Bob Cotton, who was the sales manager for a company called HSS, and they were the distributor for Sabian cymbals. HSS stands for stood for, they're no longer a company, but they were a Hohner, Soner, Sabian. And they're based out of Virginia. And I didn't really know Bob. I just sort of knew who he was from working in the industry. And so Bob said, your name's you've been recommended by some dealers up in New England. And, for this, we have an opening for a New England sales rep for HSS. And so we start talking about it a little bit. And I said, I'd be interested. And he said, well, I understand you rep drums. And I said, yes, I do. Or maybe I said it to him, and he said, well, you'd have to resign that line. And I said, well, I've been with the company for 2 years, and, from the very beginning, and I've invested a lot of my own blood, sweat, and tears into growing it. I don't want to just walk away. Is there a way I could just sell Sabian and DW and not the Sonar? And he said, no. It's HSS. It's all the product, the entire product range, Hohner products, Sonar drums, Sabian cymbals. And he said, believe me, you'll be making enough money just with Sabian that you won't miss having DW. And I said, well, I don't know about that. That's anyway, I didn't want to, again, debate that with him. And in the meantime, I'd gotten the call to come back to meet at Zildjian. So I'm sort of juggling these two things. And of course, neither knows about the other. And I go down and I meet with Armin Zildjian, and I had a great meeting with Armin. I'd met him a couple of times in the past, but I didn't know him, and he didn't know me. But, it was just a quick, funny story as I'm sitting in his office, and Lenny was there as well. And Craigie Zildjian, who's Armin's daughter, who became my boss later. And Armin were having this nice conversation about drummers and what I've been doing. And Craigie said something like, well, I just have a question here, and she's looking at my resume, and she said, I see you've moved around a lot. You lived here in Boston, and then you moved out to Los Angeles, and then you moved back, and you changed companies. And I said, no, that's a fair question. And I'll explain that. And that's because I moved out to LA to be a drummer and to try to pursue it and play music. And then I got the job at Simmons. And then it was a step up to go to DW, and I had a better opportunity. And then I moved back here because we have a child, and this is where my family is, our families are. And, she asked me another question, and then Armin Zildjian cut her off and said, Craigie, for crying out loud, I like this guy. Just hire him and give him whatever he wants. So it was a funny moment there, kind of, we all sort of laughed about it. But anyway, the long and short of that whole story is that I basically eventually came to terms with Zildjian and accepted that job, and let the people at HSS know that I was not interested in their job.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't go over well. That I'd had a couple other conversations with him, just sort of leading up to a possible interview in Boston, and, in the following weeks when he was coming up, the HSS guy. And I finally just basically said, I'd been talking to Zildjian, and we've, worked out a deal, and I'm going to work for them now. So, and the history with those two companies, it's a
I was just thinking about it, and I was going to ask it. I don't know actually, but I think I might have heard that Sabian is an offshoot of a family member. There was family tension or something, and like one of the relatives or something. What happened with? How did that come to be, Sabian?
It started when Avidus Zildjian died in 1979. Mm-hmm. And he was the the man that ran it, the patriarch of the company that ran it from the 1920s, mm-hmm. right up until 1979. Yeah. And his two sons, Armin and Robert, basically were working in the company at the time. Armin being the older son, and when Avidus died, mm-hmm. it was basically set up so that the older son would run the business, being Armin. And after a couple of years of it just them not getting along and differences in philosophies, Bob left, Robert Zildjian left, and formed his own company called Sabian up in Canada. And Zildjian had a factory in Canada at that time that did some of the finish work and made some other cymbals up there. And so part of the settlement was Bob got to keep that factory. And
I see.
And sadly, they never spoke again, and they're both gone now.
Oh wow,
Unfortunately,
man.
Bob and Armin.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't really get to know Bob till later on.
Hmm.
I worked for Armin, obviously, and it was a very volatile um, situation with the two companies. The rivalry. It was people used to ask me, is it really just one company pretending to be two so that they can own the market? And it's like, no. The
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bitterness is real. It's not some conspiracy theory. It's actually, I don't know. Won't say it probably is better now. I think just because the next generation of Zildjians, both in Zildjian and Sabian, are a little more amicable in terms of their communications. I think
That's
I'd
cool.
always try to be friendly with the Sabian folks. I knew Andy, and
Hmm.
later
Hmm.
got to know his brother Bill,
Hmm.
who worked for Sabian.
Hmm.
Um, I tried to get along with all my competitors. You know,
That's
life's too
really
short.
just a smart move, anyways. Because I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Why not?
there were definitely moments where it was contentious with
Hmm.
me and competitors with me, and sort of bound to be that way. But um, they were all, really nice to me when I left Zildjian. All my competitors,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
they were
Well,
they practically
rightly
threw me a
so. I
going
mean,
away
they should
party.
be.
Yeah, no,
That's
I'm
interesting.
I'm kidding. No, it's but anyway, yeah, I learned kind of later, in my time still at Zildjian, that it was, the idea that this guy works for this company and I work for this other company, and we somehow can't be friendly to each other at a trade show or even sit down and have a beer or a glass of wine is just kind of
Yeah.
just silly. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
so
if you
anyway,
don't mind, I have a story I want to tell you.
not at all. Come on. Yeah,
It's kind
sure,
of funny
show.
because I had and I've been trying to figure out when this is. Um, Probably around 10 or 11 years ago. Maybe 12, but somewhere in there. Not that it really matters. I was gigging probably every 2 weeks with one of 3 or 4 different bands in a little, well, actually in a really swanky hotel called the Oda Saga in Cooperstown, right down a few blocks from the Baseball Hall of Fame,
Yeah,
on
cool.
the lake. Beautiful, kind of a haunted feeling type of place, but also really cool. Golf course, all this stuff. And I had been playing there for years during the season, which is pretty much May till, well, in the Northeast we get snow. So probably Halloween might have been the last. But anyways, I don't know what month it was. I just know it was a really nice night. And I pull up in my Wrangler, had the back seat out, and I had my little kit in there. I get up to the door, flashers on, come on, I start opening up the thing. And there were these two ladies are standing on the stairway in the front of the building. And so one of the ladies says, the lady with the lighter colored, like blondish hair says, "Oh, you the drummer?" Yeah, yeah. I mean, that would be a normal question to ask somebody unloading drums, probably, right? And
I've had that a lot, that question.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm a drummer. Oh, great. Well, what kind of music do you play? Like, well, tonight with this band, probably a lot of jazz standards, maybe some R&B. Depends upon what the crowd wants. A reasonable question,
Yeah.
right? Because apparently they're staying there. Meanwhile, you're probably going to know what I'm leading up to if I say this. I'm not sure, but there's all these like probably 50 Packards, the cars from the 30s. And they're all, I think the
Oh,
least expensive one there might have been like $150,000. I mean, there's just some super high end, beautiful classic cars. And I'm a car guy. So I'm looking at those and I say, so are you here for, it looks like there might be a car show. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we are. So what kind of drums do you play? The same lady with the blonde hair, the light hair. So now it's starting to get a little suspect because the only people who asked what drums I play are usually drummers. Now, she could have been a drummer. I didn't know.
sure.
So, well, tonight I've got this little, 18-inch kick and it's a little old Slingerland set from the 60s. I love the sound of it. It's great for this music, great for the room. Oh, great, great. Says, what kind of cymbals do you use? And then my radar is really up. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Even drummers don't usually ask me that. Seldom.
Yeah.
And I said, well, so I decided I was going to open up my cymbal case. So I take it apart. I say, I got a variety here. I've got like an Istanbul ride. I got this really nice Bosphorus I just got that's really thin, but I can control it so well. I've got all these Sabians
Oh
in a
boy.
feisty. She says, well, and then it gets really interesting because, well, why do you use those cymbals? I said, well, because I like them. And I said, I don't know if you're familiar with the cymbal industry at all, but I would say, and I have a few of these at home, and I just don't have them with me tonight. But I would say the most well-known brand of cymbal is Zildjian. And I said, and they're a great company. Thank God I said this, because she said, okay, well, that's really interesting. Thanks for showing me. We'll come out and hear you tonight. So the other lady, she's like, I won't look, and she goes like, come on. And she taps her, says, come on, tell him. Tell him what? Well, I'll tell him. This is Armand's wife. So that's the Armand's wife story. And I'm like, holy crap. I said, I said, I don't even know what to say because I have like 8 Zildjian or Sabians in here, a Bosphorus, a Paischi, and an Istanbul, and my Zildjians are home. And I said, I'm sorry. She says, oh God, no, it doesn't matter. Because I knew there was some tension between the brothers. I just didn't know the history like you told it. And I'm thinking, man, I don't know, she might hate me. But she actually came out. The two of them came out and hung out for like 2 sets, so maybe 3 hours, and went over and talked with her. She was telling me all these really cool stories about Lenny, Armand, and then when Buddy Rich would come through, Lenny's on the turnpike or something like that.
Yeah. She's a really nice lady. She's a
what is her first name?
Well, she goes by Andy, and I think it's Andrea.
Right.
Or it might be Andrea. I think it's Andrea. Andrea, yeah.
Andrea.
But I know her as
That's
Andy.
right, Andy. Yeah. So we got a picture, and it's way buried in my Facebook feed somewhere down in the photos. Yeah. But it was so funny though. The way she asked the questions that led up to, the last one is, why do you use those cymbals? And I just knew something was going on.
Well,
but she was totally cool though. We had a great time. Yeah. And she had a Packard. You could have
said, Carl. Yeah.
She had a Packard, so she drove her Packard there, I guess.
Armin was a Bentley guy. He had a couple of Bentleys that.
Whoa,
and he
man,
was,
yeah.
He was a car guy. I was just going to say, what you could have said to her is, on a gig like this, I don't like to take my good stuff out. I wanted to leave.
I only known it was her beforehand, right?
Yeah, I leave all my good stuff at home, so I'm just using the B stuff tonight.
That would have been a great line. I just wasn't fast on my feet.
No, that's all right.
That was great.
She probably didn't.
That was a fun night, and it seemed like she might have enjoyed the group because they stayed for 2 sets. It's like 45-minute sets or whatever. So it was fun.
Sure.
It was really cool. Got to hear a little bit of history about Buddy and Lenny, and Lenny's on the turnpike, and that's pretty much all we talked about anyways that night. That was fun.
Yeah. That's cool.
And is she still alive?
She is, yeah. In fact,
in Arizona or something.
She's
right?
in Arizona. I see her on Facebook.
Oh, great. Well, if you're watching, Andy, I had fun.
She might be.
I really did have a good time that night. And you really led up to those questions were great, man. I've never been asked those before or since. Not like that.
I have to admit, I was going to say I've been out places, seeing a band play, and in the old days anyway, and I'd see someone playing a cymbal that wasn't a Zildjian, and I'd go up and I'd start chatting and asking questions, but I would rarely divulge my secret identity because I didn't want to but I wasn't trying to imply that I was going to give the guy some sort of endorsement deal or something. It was for education, educational purposes. I'd say, like, she was, why do you play this? And what do you like about that? And are you a drummer? Yes, I'm a drummer too. I'm just curious what you like about that ride cymbal versus, a Zildjian K or.
And what's funny is after that, a couple of years after, I ended up buying an old Zildjian K that became my baby. And it's like, this is like my child, and you can never touch it. In fact, I probably would leave that home on some gigs because I don't want it to disappear on me. You know how that
Yeah.
is.
Oh
They
yeah.
are, they're
Especially
like
with
an
the K.
extension of our body. When you get the right, especially the right cymbal sound, a drum is probably easier to, you can tune them and do different things. A
Right.
cymbal, that's a different deal.
I'm having a hard time right now, in fact, trying to land on a ride that I like. It's funny you should say that. I have a bunch and I think I love it. And then it's the same thing that I used to see when the artists used to come into Zildjian, and I'd kind of chuckle about the fact that, they'd play all these cymbals and they'd go, okay, this is the one. And then a week later I'd get a call, I don't know if that's the one. And I'd come on, what's wrong? And now I'm every bit as fickle, I should say, in that I'll generally, when I play a gig with my band, I'll take a couple of rides and I'll, most of the time get through the night with the same ride, but sometimes in between, we'll play 2 sets. The second set, I'll take out the other one and go, yeah, maybe this is going to be better, but
I've been that person too, who, I only took one cymbal back ever. He actually exchanged it here in Syracuse, but there's a guy, I can't remember his last name, Tony somebody. He had a site, maybe it's still there, symbolsonly.com.
yeah, I
from
don't know if
Rome.
he has that anymore. Yeah.
He's less than an hour from me, and I bought a bunch of stuff from him, and he had all these samples on the website, and it was cool.
Right.
And then at one point you could go there, and I remember one day he brought, like 20 different ride cymbals to somewhere where I could try them. The more he got out, the more difficulty I had making the decision. So I should have just said, give me like 3.
Yeah, exactly.
I got all confused, and it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because really they all sound really good in some way, except for the ones you just know they're not the right one because maybe they sound good, but you can't control it the way you want.
Right.
For maybe
Right.
what you play or your style or your touch. But cymbals are an interesting thing. My father had this joke, cymbal-minded drummers. He likes cymbal-minded drummers because guys like, oh man, Danny Gottlieb, the guy who
Peter.
just passed last year. Oh, Peter, yeah, totally. My dad's was a big Peter fan. My dad passed about 5 years ago. Mom's doing great though, and
Good.
they love Peter. The guy in Europe, he passed away. John Christensen.
Oh
Was
yeah,
a
sure.
cymbal
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Cymbal-minded. Gary Husband, a cymbal-minded drummer. They can all play the cymbal so beautifully, and Joe Morello and all these people.
Jeff
like,
Hamilton.
Oh God, yeah.
Jeff's yeah. There's
It's almost like magic. Cymbals alone, and it's awesome. So wait, let me go back here before I get off on a tangent again.
Sure.
But so you started there what year at Zildjian, and then you were there
started,
until, was it 8 years ago? You said around this time.
Yeah. I started in May of '89 at Zildjian, and I sort of finished that story, but the long and short of it is I let Don Lombardi know at DW that I was making this change, and he was completely supportive, and I was just in touch with Don today, in fact.
Oh, cool.
Earlier. So we're still in contact and friends. But anyway, so I started there in May of '89, and I left, I was done at the end of January of 2013. So 8 years ago.
Wow.
Right about now with the
I
NAMM
remember
show.
that. There was a buzz in the community. John's leaving. It can't be true. So I also, I'd love to talk about, and I have time, but I don't want to keep you for any longer than you have or want to.
I've got some more time. I got a little bit more time. I was playing before, and I was gonna play a little bit more later. Just practice a little bit. But.
Well, it'd be really interesting to hear what you're doing now, since, by the way, your YouTube, that's really cool. People, you need to go onto John's YouTube because there's one with is it Rick Marotta and Steve Gadd?
And Steve, yeah.
That's fun.
That's a classic, that one. That's one of the things I'm doing is this, and I started that, as I think I told you in that email, I started that like last March during lockdown. I started doing these Facebook Live things, just initially kind of on my own. And I did one with my bandmates. I'm in a band called Grand Theft Audio,
I saw
and we're
that.
like a classic rock band. Yeah.
I love
And
that.
and we were like playing every week in a busy band in the area. And so we did one just for fun with all of us, a Zoom kind of, when I figured out how to do the Zoom thing, we did one so that we could have our friends and fans that follow the band come on and have a little conversation. And then I started, having drummers do them with me. And I think it might have been Steve Gadd was the first one that I did.
Mhm.
And no surprise, there's my friend Penny Lane is watching, I can see, and she's one
Oh,
of our
great. And
biggest,
my mom
she
is
is our number
watching.
one. What's that?
My mom is watching too. Hey,
Oh,
Mom, how you doing?
hi, Mom. Penny
I'm
is our
still.
biggest number one fan, by the way.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
I have to
great.
say that. But so
I've
Steve
heard
was
that
the
name.
first one.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I've heard this name before. Penny Lane. Is this a drummer? Is a drummer?
Um, it's not her real name,
Okay.
but it's a character in a movie, Almost Famous,
Okay. All right.
named after a Beatles song, of course. But
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Cool.
she's
Cool.
she said, "I am." When you said, is she a famous drummer? Yes, she is.
Okay. So
She's a
yes, so
character.
that one with your band, Grand Theft Audio, right?
Audio, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's a great one. And there's one, I think is it yeah, you and Murata talking about, no, you and Steve and Murata talking about Asia, Steely
Yes,
Dan, and how out of it kind of was like out of the pop thing, yet totally into it. And I know Murata was saying how the only other person he could think of who might be able to do it is Erskine.
right,
He could probably
right.
think of it and articulate something in his own way on that. Of course, he ended up touring with them 93 or whatever, but
I
that's
saw
such a
that tour.
classic, on the what I think Wayne Shorter's on that tune, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
And Steve tells the story about how I guess when he went in and did his drum tracks, they put Wayne on afterwards. So I think he didn't know Wayne was going to be on it till I think he heard the finished product.
Oh
And it was
wow.
typical of Steely Dan in those days to just, they'd track maybe a rhythm section, or they'd track, some number of players at a time, and then they'd add stuff or take stuff away. So,
Yeah.
he kind of, it was 77 or 8 or sometime around there. And he really didn't know what it was really going to be, just that it was an epic piece. But it's pretty cool that on the same record, Rick played Hey 19, which, has its own cult following of that's one of those songs that I constantly cite as being a song that every drummer thinks they can play until they actually try to play it
Yeah.
and play it the right way. And they're sadly mistaken.
Well, that's no easy task, because I've played that song and it was like, I say this respectfully to Rick, it's like agony trying to actually
Yeah,
make it sound like him. Like
exactly.
that did
Yeah.
not actually happen for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Rick, thank
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
very much. And I learned a lot that, gosh, like 30 something years ago trying to play that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those songs that I'll play on my dashboard or my steering wheel while I'm driving,
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, I'm killing it. I'm killing this tune. And then I'll sit down behind the drums and I'll sound like I never played before in my life, or like a 4-year-old tripping over his toys. You know what I mean? It's
So
just,
funny, man.
yeah. I mean, there's just that song is so deceiving. And saying, I think, like, to some degree, Josie, with Jim Keltner is a similar, Jim has that ability to make something sound simple until you try, and Jeff Beccaro, until you
Yeah.
play it. And I'll add Ringo to that list as well, that deceptively, it sounds simple, but it's not.
Well, there's a
And
magic to that.
yeah. Yeah.
There is a thing to that is the unexplained. And I think it really comes down to, it's Ringo, it's Keltner, it's the individual. And they're the only ones who can pull it off the way they did, because they're them and they play the way they do. And so this goes back to just a thought that I have frequently for many, many years now. I've talked about it recently with, Dom and Sergio and Erskine a couple of years ago when I saw him in LA. It's like, what I find, oh, and Skip Haddon, I talked with him today. As a matter of fact, we just had a random call this morning, and it was so much fun. But we're talking about how now, not just now, but I think in the recent, let's say 15, 20 years, maybe longer, it really takes a lot to become a distinguishable voice because of all the influences before us. And, I haven't done a live gig in like 7 years. I've recorded, but I needed time off. When I do reemerge, it's probably going to be in a healing mode with actually working on something with Bobby Thomas Jr. So I'm really excited because he's
Oh,
doing a lot
cool.
of healing in his own way of educating children and eliciting such evolution out of them as not just drummers, but more as people than drumming, but drumming as the vehicle. Like if
Mhm.
he was a plumber, he'd use plumbing to do it, So
Yeah, yeah.
I stole that line from Skip though, or no, from Dom. But it is true because we'll use our vehicles to do this. We can do this, but establishing a voice. And when you hear Rick lay down a note, you hear Gadd, you hear Buddy, you hear Elvin, you
Mm.
hear Tony, and a lot of times like all you have to do is say the first name.
Right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. Or
Yeah.
Schofield, Sco. You
Yeah.
always know it's Sco, and that's a beautiful thing. And it's another reason why I think, well, searching for your own voice, your own distinguishable voice, and your sound, it's becoming more difficult. It's not impossible, but it takes the real, authentic, genuine you to search for
Emerge.
that,
Yeah.
and actually live that and be it, and eventually it'll evolve, and maybe somebody will recognize that it's you.
That's a really good point. I never actually really thought that deeply about that, but you're right, because I think we can't help but um, evolve in a way that brings all our influences together, and
Absolutely.
yeah, some influences being greater than others, so you're going to maybe favor something that Tony Williams plays, or that John Bonham plays,
Absolutely.
or yeah, and that's yeah, you're right, and that's a really good point. And all those guys you mentioned certainly had influences. I mean, but they're their own person. They're, I mean, Rick especially. I think of him as a guy that I think he had the benefit of because he started playing drums so late at age 19. He
Hey,
didn't.
19.
Hey, 19, yeah, he didn't. He wasn't like an 11 or 12-year-old kid
Mhm.
like I was, immersed in Beatles or Led Zeppelin or Rolling Stones or Jimi Hendrix and just trying to sound like all those guys, just playing on those records. I think Rick, you listened to a lot of R&B, and just it was such a natural thing for him, such a organic development for him, to where he went from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. Like he went from deciding he was going to be a drummer to playing on records like a year later.
Sure.
um, like we're engineers and producers were going, hey, come back tomorrow, we're doing this date, and it was a very, it just, he just sort of rose right to the top quickly, so with his own thing.
Sorry.
um,
When Brandy doesn't feel like she's getting enough attention, she likes to knock over my soft light boxes. It's kind of like a 2-year-old. I'll be with you soon, sweetie. Um,
but
she's
anyway,
fed.
it's
She went out. She's cool. She just wants to be petted. But and I left out. I'm sorry, Dr. Gadd, I left you out. I mean, there's of all the people I know, for me personally, if I hear, Jack Deason, I hear Elvin, I hear Steve Gadd, I hear um, Buddy. I just know it's them. It doesn't
yeah.
take much more than a couple of measures at the most sometimes.
Hmm.
You just, I mean, if you've listened and and this is what you are learning, or maybe aspiring to, or learning from, you taking the influence. Because I mean, God only knows, I was trying to do all the Gadd licks. That's why I did that drum transcription for modern drum. Well, I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. I just wanted to see. I did a transcription of this quartet number 2 on the Chick Corea 3 Quartets album.
Yeah.
of Steve Gadd. I wrote it, actually, I posted wrong the other day. I wrote it out in 82. And then my friend Jimmy Johns, who's a great drummer here in Syracuse, he is the man for, especially when it comes to the straight ahead stuff. Beautiful drummer. He said, God, you got to send that into Modern Drummer. I said, you got to be kidding me. It's written in blue ink, not black. But you know what? I sent it in and they sent me like $200. They said, sign this thing. When you sign the check, it means you give up your rights. I'm like, that is cool with me. And what I like,
That's
though,
cool.
is I wanted to understand more about Steve Gadd. So I wrote out a few other things that he did too, but that was a major undertaking for me because that's, first of all, it's kind of a long solo. It's also very intricate. Are you familiar with this one?
Yeah, not real familiar, but I've definitely heard it because we were listening to. I was listening to all those tracks when we were doing the tribute to Steve in 2003, and we were picking songs for the band to play. So, but anyway, yeah,
cool. Yeah. So actually, it I'll just show you real quick. I have a few issues of this stored down in the basement in the safe box, but basically, it's the cover looks like this. Came out, I think, July of '83.
yeah,
That issue of Modern Drummer had the solo in it. With, I mean, and I'm humbled and honored that they put it in there. It's great. But I got to see now on paper and make these correlations and relationships. So not only was I, because I didn't have we didn't use video back then, right? I mean, you had to buy
right.
VHS and pay a lot of money for lessons, and that was fine. But now you go on YouTube. But at least I had the vinyl. Of course, I think my dad might have had a turntable I used, or somewhere I got a turntable that went down to 16 RPMs instead of 33.
Yeah.
That's how I did that thing. And, you know, being able to visualize and see, it really gave me a better understanding of maybe a better understanding what's going on in Steve's head or heart. And it's magic, man. I love it. I
That's
love it.
great.
So it helped me a little bit in developing as a player. But yeah, I got off on a tangent again, but this is what I do. So
it's easy to do that when you're talking about Steve. He'll send you off on a tangent.
Well, you know, Steve,
that
and then
inspiring.
I'm talking with you, which for me is a real honor. And like I said before, I might have been off camera. I feel like I know you sort of because I mean we've communicated a little bit, but way before that. So I read your postings, I see all this stuff. It's like, I mean, this is John. This is the quintessential John, and you're exactly the way I knew you before I knew you. So you're the authentic, genuine you, which I appreciate. So when you left Zildjian, though, what have you been doing since then?
Yeah, so for a while I wasn't doing much, and I loved it. It was so I left in the early part of 2013, and my wife and I that year in particular we traveled I used to travel a lot for work, but it was work travel. You know, I'd be in some European city for a couple of days and somewhere else, or out to LA all the time. But we traveled. I remember that year in particular, we took my son and his wife, my daughter-in-law, who were somewhat newlyweds at that point, to London for a week.
Right.
We for the first year we rented a place on Martha's Vineyard. We used to stay at Rick's house on the vineyard all the time before that. We rented a place. A few weeks that summer, we went to Italy. We went to London another time. We spent a week in Bermuda. We just did stuff that we couldn't have done if I was still working, obviously with my schedule and everything. So that was great. And little by little, I was sort of delving into playing again. I made it a mission that I'd stopped playing for about 20 years. Once my sort of life took over in terms of being having kids and having a demanding job, I had to sort of, really not choose between, but there wasn't enough time in the day for me to like try to be a drummer too, frankly. And I needed to come home and just disconnect from that world sometimes, So anyway, but one of the things I was excited about when I was leaving Zildjian was getting back into playing drums. And by 2014, I had the ultimate incentive to do that when I got a phone call from my bandmate, Neil Porter, and Grand Theft Audio, saying that the band basically that they had needed a drummer to fill in on a gig. Would I be interested in doing it? And one of the other guys in the band is one of my longest and oldest friends, Paul Gianelli, who we started playing in a band 40 plus years ago, Paul and I, right up until I moved to LA. So we'd been musical brothers and bandmates, for a lot of years, up till I moved to LA, and then gradually sort of stopped playing. In fact, when I moved back to Boston, Paul and I were neighbors, and I subbed for his drummer in his band one night for a weekend at a Chinese restaurant. And that made me kind of swear off playing in a band for a while, because it was a bad weekend. But anyway, that's another story. I'm going off.
No, it's okay.
Topic.
We all have stories like that too.
So I get this. Actually, it's probably more like an email or a message from Neil that they're looking for a drummer, and I said, well, I'm flattered you guys would ask me, but I haven't been playing. I'm really just trying to get back into it. I'd embarrass me, and I'd embarrass you if I try to do this gig. No, come on, you can do it. And we want it. This would be great. And Neil I had known for a long time as well, but we had never played together because at the time that I knew him, he wasn't a singer that I was aware of, or he didn't play guitar. So he was just an old friend. But Paul was my ex-bandmate, and there's another guy named Paul Candelori, another guitar player, really fine guitar player and singer. So anyway, Neil sends me the song list that they have, and it's just like, it's like my dream song list of Beatles and Rolling Stones and Who songs, and I'm trying to think of what in those days the songs that we were playing, just like classic rock stuff that I loved.
Sure.
So I said, okay, yeah, I'll do the gig, and this will give me something to really work at for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to really put my nose to the grindstone and really shed these tunes. I mean, they're simple tunes, but I think maybe you can relate to this, Carl. It's when you haven't played for a while, even the simplest tunes, I knew what was being played, but executing them and making them feel right, and the mechanics of all that stuff. My time, it felt rough and edgy, and I'd hear these songs and go, oh yeah, it's a simple eighth note hi-hat thing, and the fill's right here, and it's simple, but then I'd sit down and play it, and I felt stiff, I felt rigid. And Steve Gadd was very key in just motivating me every day. Rick Latham is watching, by the way.
Oh, cool.
An old friend who I met through DW.
Well, I'm just going to interject 1 second, because this is what I talk about a lot.
Using his book too, by the way.
Sorry, we have to connect, man, because I also have a book by him. But a lot of in my business of movement rehab, cognitive rehab, memory rehab, and all this kind of stuff, a lot of things are simple. But when it comes to simple does not always mean easy.
Right.
And that's something that I think, I certainly didn't know that for a long time.
I didn't either.
I'll just put it that way. You try to do something simple. Yeah, it is simple. Conceptually, it's simple. It looks simple. And in a way, it is simple, yet it doesn't mean it's easy. So especially as a musician, let's say a drummer, and trying to play it a certain way with the right touch, the right feel, the right groove, the right part of the pocket, the right whatever, could be just grooving. But if you're in the wrong part of the pocket and the bass player's ahead or behind you and you're not grooving, then it's just not easy.
It's a waste of time. Yeah, exactly. It's just not easy. And that's a great segue to what I was going to say, is that most of these songs I'd played before, and many a million times back in the 70s when I was in my first, rock band as a teenager. And the thing was that I realized as I got older was I never really listened right to really probably ever listen to songs correctly and really, and not so that I could copy them exactly, but that where I really truly absorbed and understood the feel and the vibe of the tune. And so the simplest Beatles song that I knew, I Want to Hold Your Hand, that I played when I was 13, playing it now because I was so laser focused on it feeling right, was
Mm-hmm.
making me crazy because I couldn't make it feel right. It's like, shit, man. I'm like, it's so easy. It's open hi-hat, sloshy kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it sounds like shit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm one day I'm telling Steve, I'm on the phone with Steve, and I told him I had this gig coming up. So he'd call me every day, literally every day, and check in
That's
at
so
like
cool.
4:30, 5 o'clock. He'd go, "Hey man," and this is like he'd be on the road with James Taylor. So he'd be somewhere and maybe in this hotel room at sound check. He'd say, "Hey man, how'd you do today? Did you play?" I said, "Yeah." "How long did you play for it?" I played about 2 hours." "How'd it go? How'd it feel?" I'd say, "Well, and many times I'd go, I don't know, Steve, and say, what's wrong? What's the matter? Tell me what's going on." And I one time in particular, I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, I've been working at it for a couple of weeks now. And I guess I'm just looking for the magic bullet to figure out how to not that I ever had a lot of chops, but I used to have some chops, and I try to
Mm-hmm.
sit down and play like a nice clean single stroke roll, with some speed to it. And he'd go, wait a minute. What songs do you have to play a fast? Why do you need to play a fast single stroke roll? I'm like, well, I don't really need to play a fast single. I just want is why? Why do you want to play that? Who are you going to impress when you're playing a fast single stroke roll? And at first I thought he was kidding me. And then he gives me this lecture and he says, listen, man, let me tell you something right now. That's bullshit. Playing fast. You know who gives a shit about that? Nobody. Nobody gives a shit about how fast you can play.
Wow.
You want it needs to feel good. You want the guys in the band to be grooving. You want them to be digging it. You want to be backing up. You want to be supporting the music. And I knew that, of course, but he had to kind of kick me in the side of the head for it to really sink in. And it really kind of turned the corner. I'll tell you I'll drop another name.
Oh yeah.
I know the song Paint It Black like the back of my hand. And it was one of the first songs as a kid I played along to, the Hot Rocks, Rolling Stones record.
Yep.
It's a Rolling Stones song. And Charlie plays this sort of eighth note driving beat on the tom tom is for the
Mm-hmm.
verse, and then plays kick, snare, hi-hat on the chorus. So I happened to be talking to Charlie one day, and I said, I'm in this band, and I'm got a gig coming up, and we're doing Paint It Black. And he started laughing. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, I'm having kind of a hard time getting the right feel. It sounds like you're playing quarter notes sometimes, and other times it sounds like you're playing eighth notes. And he said, "Oh, I don't know, John." He said, "It's an easy song. You can play it, no
Excuse me.
problem." He said, "Just don't play it too fast.
Oh.
It's easy to play it fast." And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"You're right. It is easy to sort of run away with it uh, when you're playing." So anyway, I had the benefit of some good advice from some drummers that I look up to. So anyway, we had one rehearsal. I went to my buddy Paul Gianelli's house where we had a rehearsal before this first gig. And it was really turned out to be more of a run through because we never played any song more than one time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we play the songs pretty close to the record, more or less in terms of the form of the songs, which keeps it simple. Some things we've changed some arrangements over time where it's a longer instrumental section and a longer guitar solo. But I met the other guy, Paul Candelori, for the first time at that rehearsal. And it was great. If it wasn't just me, I felt like I'm not fooling myself into thinking this sounds good. I think it really does sound good. And I think they probably there would have been some indication if it, in other words, I didn't go there delusional thinking, leaving there, I should say, wow, I really killed it when in fact I sucked. I think it was just, we all played well together. I think they
Yeah.
appreciated the volume that I played at and that I play at. I don't play loud. I used to play really hard and heavy, and I don't anymore. And I play so that we can all have some dynamics and just things that I've learned from watching Peter Erskine play or
Mm-hmm.
Steve Gadd or Steve Smith or somebody like that, playing dynamically and So anyway, so did this first gig with them, and it was really great, and I had a blast. And at the end of it, Neil or somebody said, we have another gig at this same place in 3 weeks if you want to do it. And I'm like, well, what about your other drummer? Don't worry about him. If you want to do it, you can do it. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So, that was it. That was 2014. And
Oh, cool.
I never looked back. And little by little, as I tend to do, I kind of took over the band. And no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I didn't create a hostile takeover. I'm kidding. But, no,
Well,
it feels like a great group process with us. So
that's really good, man. The chemistry's everything. You can
yeah,
have the greatest
exactly.
players together, and if the chemistry's not there, then you just because it feels wrong or doesn't feel right or whatever. I want to just show, if you don't mind, you have some really great photos you sent to me. Charlie Watts,
That's my man. Yeah,
isn't that cool? Oh my gosh! And didn't he have a big band for a while?
he did.
Did you ever see them?
I never got to see the big band. I saw he had a couple of different bands. I saw
Mhm.
he had a band for the first time that I saw in New York, that was a septet, or I forget. It wasn't the big band, but it was a good sized band. And I went and saw him at the Blue Note. He invited me in 2001, not long after 9/11.
Oh
He
wow!
was playing at the Blue Note, and he called and said, I don't know how you feel about coming to New York, but I'll be there. And I said, I'm there. And Anton Fig and I went together, and
Oh, cool.
I have a picture of the three of us. And um,
S-
anyway,
That's that looks like an old symbol he's got there.
that is an old symbol. I'll tell you the quick story. That was in my
Mhm.
office at Zildjian, and I had come across this old 16-inch A Zildjian thin crash. And Charlie at the time had been playing this old Peisty 602 as his on this side as his main sort of regular crash. And he plays that China up here
Mhm.
that's kind of he uses as a crash. But this is the symbol that the Peisty is what's on all the hit records like Brown Sugar, Honky
Okay.
Tonk Woman. He's had it since the 60s. So
Yeah,
I'd been trying to get him to play a Zildjian, or just, yeah,
anyone can see that. You can tell it's an older one. It's really looks like a classic.
that's a 60. So I had that symbol, and it sounded like his Peisty,
Mhm.
and I'd been holding it for him. So when he told me he wanted to come visit the factory, finally he had agreed to come. I gave him that symbol at the end of the day, and he put it on his finger, and he hit it, and he went, "Oh, this is lovely." And I said, "Well, I hope you enjoy it or something." And he said, "I can have it." And I said, "Yes." This old, and only Charlie, well, not only Charlie, but few drummers would be so moved by an old,
Mhm.
dirty, tarnished, symbol. But
Mhm.
he certainly understood the significance, and he hit it, and he loved it, and he carried it out with him that day. I'd had him pick out a couple other symbols while he was at Zildjian that day, that he asked me to send to him. He said, "Can you send these?" And I'll put them in my storage. And but that particular symbol he took with him. He said, "Well, this one
Oh,
I'll take." So
oh, that's
it,
nice.
it's a great sounding symbol. It ended up cracking the Peisty a couple of years later, and I think he's used that symbol on occasion.
Wow.
Um,
That's
but I'll tell
we'll
you a
have to
quick
do
Charlie
this.
story.
Yeah,
Quick,
yeah, I want to hear this. Plus, I just want to say before I forget, we have to do this again and do like a part two because you have a lot to share. But yes, please tell me a
sure,
Charlie
you bet.
story.
Well, this is very self-indulgent Charlie story.
That's okay.
Um, this was a couple of years ago. The Stones were doing a private. It was actually 4 years ago now that I think about it, because it was 2016. They were doing a private show at Gillette Stadium for Bob Kraft, who's the owner of the New England Patriots,
Okay.
and his son Jonathan, the Kraft family. Um, so just it's like 100 something, maybe 200 people were invited to this thing. It was on the 50-yard line, and
Oh, that's cool.
in a tent. They were in a tent, and they had a stage set up. So Charlie invited me to come, like it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, and I go down there, and it's great. And the great thing about it was it wasn't a regular Stones show, so it wasn't crazy fraught with with just madness and groups of people. I was
Sure.
able to spend a lot of quality time with Charlie. I went into catering, had something to eat, and then Charlie's tech Don McCauley came and found me and said, come on back to Charlie's dressing room. He's waiting for you. He'd like to see you. So I go back to Charlie's dressing room, and I think Don was hanging with us for a while, and then he had stuff to
Excuse me.
do. So it's just me and Charlie hanging in there, and we were there, probably an hour. And if you know anything about me, which maybe you do at this point, he's my number one hero. He's just
I
the fact that
suspected that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great,
that
man. That's
we're
great.
we're buddies, and so we're chatting, and he said, I've got to see Ronnie about something, meaning Ronnie Wood. I've got to see Ronnie. Do you have time to come with me to Ronnie's dressing room for a minute? I said, sure. So we go into Ronnie's dressing room, and Ronnie's in there with his wife, and he has these like newborn twins, and Ronnie sketches. He paints and he draws, and
Hmm.
he sketched like some pictures on an easel, and like the night set list. I'll send you the picture. I took a picture of it, like the set list for the night he had sketched on a sketch pad
Oh
in different
wow.
colored chalk. So they're talking about something, and then he introduces me to Ronnie, who I'd met before a couple of times. And he says, Ronnie, he says, you remember John? Do you remember John? And he said, the Zildjian guy. And Charlie says, not anymore. He quit.
Ah,
Now he plays them. And it was just so, like, and
oh
I should say
wow.
that leading up to that, we'd been in his dressing room talking about drums and drumming and cymbals and like two drummers talking. Really, it wasn't me
Hmm.
representing a company, sort of in my company hat. It's really just me as a friend, as another drummer. And so driving home that night, I thought about that, and it really really hit me that he was really acknowledging me as a drummer, and it was pretty heavy. I mean, and other guys like Peter and Steve and even Rick have, when they do that, and they do, it's pretty, if anything now kind of moves the dial for me, it's that, to have these guys that I just absolutely idolize, sort of acknowledge me, not as the guy that takes care of them when they need something at Zildjian, but I did more than that, and they know that I was more than that to them. But as a drummer, and when Peter asks my
Absolutely.
advice, like, or Steve or somebody, what do you think of this, or Rick, like,
Hmm.
what do you think of this symbol, or what do you think of this, and um, that's pretty heavy duty, and
It is, and in my humble opinion, it's not a self-indulgent story. It's just a cool story because it's a human story.
yeah,
It's you're a human. You're a very giving person. You've helped so many people, and you tie the brotherhood of drummers together. And I mean, I could say, uh, it's trust me, everybody. I'm not here to impress anybody. I'm just a guy, man. I play the drums. I'm decent at best. So,
I'm sure you're
but
better than decent.
I sent us a couple of CDs to Peter Erskine. This is like 10 years ago, I think, or 11 years. He ended up writing this beautiful testament that we used for like a review. I had no idea he would do that.
That's great, man. Wow.
I mean, you know what? That's not true. Actually, I did ask him if he would write something if he liked it, but he went over the top with it. That's what it was. And
Yeah,
but to get those words and I guess I felt somewhat validated in a way, and I feel guilty for saying that in some ways, and then I feel human for saying in other ways, because I wasn't really looking for, oh, he said this and now I'm going to be famous or something. That wasn't the idea.
right.
It's probably very similar to you being acknowledged, and that feeling you get, it feels really nice, and it's okay to feel good when your idol says something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean I'm
absolutely. Yeah,
special or I'm better than anybody, and it's not even about that. It's just an appreciation,
yeah,
a
yeah.
nod. It's beautiful.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, for me, it's what's really special about it for me is that I'm able to sort of circle back to what I started out doing in the first place, that I always wanted to do, but took a little detour.
Yep.
Not regrettably. I had a great career, and a lot of longevity in the business, and I think I had a decent amount of success doing what I was doing. But in the beginning, all I wanted to do was play the drums and be a drummer. And to sort of come back to it now, that in itself is pretty amazing. I'm not a professional. I mean, I'm not earning a great living doing it, but I'm able to, when things get back to normal, I know we're going to start playing again.
Sure.
And then to have these friendships with these drummers, with these guys that I just absolutely look up to
Mhm.
have that have continued all these years since I've left Zildjian. And now we talk as drummers. I've subbed in a band on the Vineyard, but we spend the summer down there, and Rick Murata has a place down there as well. So we're together almost every day, Rick and I and my wife, and
Mhm.
one of my sister-in-laws down there. And I've Rick has a band with his brother that plays, and we'll go see them. And then I play sometimes with the guitar player in that band. Will have me sub in his band, and Rick will come, and his brother Jerry will
Oh,
come
wow.
and see me. And that, I mean, it's if nothing else, it's a pretty great feeling to know that I've been able to sort of come back to doing um, what I always really wanted to do, and that was to play. And not, I didn't want to be a famous drummer. I just wanted to be a drummer, be in a band, and be able to work and make some sort of a living doing it. And
Yeah.
um,
Well,
so
I think I have a number of thoughts going on right now. I guess one of them is that this thing that I did. This is about you. This video, but I'll be self-indulgent for 1 second. Um, I did a CD 2 years ago. Actually,
Hmm.
when you get the book in the mail, there's a copy of my CD in it.
Oh,
So I
great, thank
recorded
you.
this 2 years ago, and what it is you see that it says Parkinson's Global Project. That's a nonprofit I started for people with Parkinson's. So we help families all around the world who can't afford whatever medications, therapies, and this and that. They don't have access, and we send medications or whatever through different. So when I started putting this CD together, it worked out really, really well. Jimmy Haslip introduced me to a beautiful guitarist, Jeffrey Richmond, who is
I know who he is. Yeah.
I love Jeff like a brother. Jeff, if you see this, by the way, I owe you a phone call, so we're going to talk soon in a day or two. And then Jeff, I've started helping him. Because it's okay to say because people know it. He lives with Parkinson's, and we try to get the
Mm.
tremor to diminish on his picking hand. I think it was. And so there are things we can do to help with that temporarily. So maybe you can get through half an hour and pick well, or not spill a drink, so we can diminish tremors usually for
Mhm.
temporarily. Bottom line is, I had to teach my course in LA, the Parkinson's course that I wrote. This is like 6 months ahead, and I am on a tangent, but I know exactly where I'm coming back to. It
You're doing
it but
fine.
but it's kind of to relate what you were talking about a minute ago, and you'll see what I mean. So he says, "Well, will you come out here? We have to jam." As I said, "No, you come. So you come to my workshop as a guest. Please be there." So of course, I don't want your money. Just come. Well, you have to jam. I said, "Oh my God, I haven't played in 5 years. Not a note. I'll suck. You don't want to play with me." He says, "No, I do, and we will." And there's a studio 2 blocks down the road. Literally, there is one 2 blocks from him up in I can't remember right now. It's north of LA. But anyways, he
Ventura.
says, in fact, let's Granada Hills.
Oh, Granada Hills. Yep.
Granada Hills,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And it's Paul Taverner's studio, Big Studio Records. Paul Taverner's a drummer. He's a really good drummer. Actually,
Yeah.
Peter's recorded there, Vinny's recorded there a lot. Um, I mean, Paul's had the best of the best in there, right? So he pulls Jimmy Haslip into it, and Jimmy had produced my last CD 10 years ago, which is not mine. It's just a group I was in. I brought Jimmy in to do that. And anyways, bottom line is we get this thing together. We got Scott Kinsey on it. We got Gary Novak plays a couple songs. Peter Erskine donated his time, talent, and name for a couple
Wow.
songs for this, nonprofit thing. And I don't think I could have handled this 15 years ago because I would have been so star stricken.
Hmm.
And not like you handle the stars and the people. eh, you're the perfect person to be dealing with all these legends and icons, and you've done such a great job of uniting them and us all together. It's like I feel like I know a lot of people because of you, or
Oh,
about them.
thanks.
But this worked out well because I realized years ago, finally, I started to realize that they have names, they have talents, but they're human. And
Yeah.
so when Scott Kinsey walks in, and I've been following Tribal Tech for years, and Gary Novak, who I'd never met, and he was like the coolest, hippest guy. Like,
Oh,
we go hiking the next day. Hey, you want to hike a mountain with me?
he's the funniest
Oh,
guy, Gary. I love
okay,
him. Yeah.
sure, I'll hike a mountain with you. It ended up not happening because of something that came up, but I mean, and we've been in touch, and they're humans first.
Yeah.
They're special humans, and in different capacities. I guess we all are in different ways, but that was just a really great experience. And it's nice to be able to connect as a human and share a common interest and have an actual just a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And so I guess that's what I wanted to say is you're communicating on a friendship level. I talked with Scott Kinsey the other day, and he's a friend. I never thought I'd be a friend with Scott Kinsey. Or
Yeah.
with, I can't say I'm a friend with Dave Weckl, but we're friendly. So when we see each other, when we talk muscle cars. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no drum talk.
I totally get what you're saying. Yeah. And it happens very naturally
Yeah.
when you get to know these guys and they're comfortable with you. And, in my case, I think because so early on, I certainly, um, in the very beginning of being exposed or being around a lot of these guys, I would feel nervous and, uh,
Yeah.
but you realize at a point that, um, I can't really even explain it because people have asked that question. And the best way to explain it is that, you have to get beyond, in my case, I would realize, okay, it's my job to be helping these guys, servicing them, supporting them, whatever the case is. And there's no room for me to, I have to be comfortable or they're going to be uncomfortable, for them to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And it just, and I think a lot of it has to do too with what we just said is them getting to know you and being more comfortable with you,
Mhm.
that it just becomes, there are a couple of guys that when I first met them, it wasn't bad, but maybe awkwardness isn't the right word, but it's just, they just had to get to know me. When I say that, they would have been like that with anybody. It's maybe a
Yeah, they
little,
probably maybe they had their guard up because of how
yeah,
they get treated sometimes, or the
yeah.
idolization factor. I had probably 15 years ago, I saw Virgil Donati, and that was a point in time where I wasn't there yet, ready to talk to him, but I
Mm.
did. And I know he was kind of put off by it. Virgil, I love you. But I couldn't believe what I saw that night. Actually, I could not believe what I was seeing him do, and I still can't believe it when I watch him. And I've met him since. He doesn't remember that. There's no way he'd remember that first time. But I was like ah, I couldn't help myself. It's like God walked off the stage, and I got to meet him. So it took me a long time, man. I tell people, I think I'll be 60 in a couple months. It's really like I was 48 years old before I started to get my shit together and realize a lot of things about life and people. And thank God it kind of eventually, I'm a late bloomer, but better late than never.
That's funny. That's funny.
Wow. So, you know, I'd, I'd keep you longer, and I'm
No,
happy to
this
talk longer, but I also want to respect your time. And if you got some playing to do, don't you?
I was going to try to get a little time in behind the kit before dinner, before I,
Absolutely.
before my wife gives me the,
Oh,
so.
it's 4:42 already. My gosh. Well, listen, man. First of all, I declare that this is part one.
All right. I'd love to do this.
And
Yeah. And can I
whether
just
it's
say a
2 weeks,
quick,
2 months, or 2 years, we'll do it again. Yes, please.
I want to say two quick hellos. I think
Yes.
Penny Lane, we already talked about her.
Hmm.
She might be gone now, but if she's still there, Penny, thanks for watching. My best friend, Mike Mahoney, who is hugely responsible for me being a drummer. My next door neighbor is a kid, still lives in the house that his parents had next to where my mom is.
Oh, great.
And my best buddy, who gave me a drum when I was 11 years old. Um, and really perpetuated my love for the drums. So Michael, if you're watching, I love you, buddy. You're my best pal, and I hope you're feeling good. He's been a little under the weather, but I hope you're feeling good. And one last hello to Scott Hessler, who I think you know as well.
I know the name.
Scott's an old friend, and Scott had been working for Auralex for a while and brought me on board at Auralex last year
Oh, okay.
as an artist, and I'm getting some
Beautiful.
stuff for my drum room from Auralex to get the right sound and get it sounding good. So
Oh,
thanks
that's
to Scott,
great.
that's happening. So Scott, good to see you. Anyway, thanks for letting me say hello to those guys.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So maybe in part two, because all of us we have comments on the feed like great stories and things. A lot of us like to hear stories. So
Sure.
just this one here, beautiful picture, Tony, Vinny, you. Whoa. Right? And then we've got I would love to hear you got Steve Smith. Oh, Carter Buford, man. This is
Yeah.
beautiful. So it would be really cool if you this is a beautiful look at these guys.
That was taken. You want to hear something crazy? And I know we're
Sure.
we're running out of time. That
Oh, no.
photo, it came up on my Facebook memories today. That was taken 8 years ago tonight
Really?
out in
Wow.
LA at the Guitar Center drum offs. We were all there for that. And
Oh, wow.
we were all kind of standing somewhere together and, talking about my leaving Zildjian. I don't know what we were talking about, but Peter, I think, took his camera out and went with those long arms,
Yeah,
took a
yeah.
selfie, and it was a keeper. Yeah.
Is this Keith Carlock?
Keith Carlock.
There's a badass for you.
Oh, is he ever? Yeah.
My nickname for him is Mr. Smooth. I saw him with Steely Dan a few times. I'm like, man, this guy is smooth as silk and beautiful how he plays. And he
Amazing.
plays. I'd like to watch him play. It's really interesting. Vinny again. Yeah, there's some Dave Weckl, Stephen Rick. Who's this is the last one I have here. Who is this gentleman here? I should know.
That is Mitch Mitchell.
No way.
The great Mitch Mitchell, Jimi Hendrix Experience. Yeah, it was
No
taken about a month before he died, sadly.
Wow. Jeez.
He was a huge influence as a kid,
Sure.
And he was a sweetheart. We became very close. And
No, that's
yeah,
cool,
sure.
man.
I'd love to come back, and we'll just. I won't tell you any of the boring stuff. We'll just tell some funny stories.
No, you know what? This is all just so cool. It's great to talk with you, meet you here, to learn some things, hear stories, hear some history. There's a lot of history going on in these conversations. I love that. A lot of people do. So, well, great, man. So part two, whenever
Thanks.
you have time, no hurry, but any time is cool. I'm fairly flexible these days because,
Me too.
COVID and all that. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you too, Carl. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to just quickly plug. I do a similar thing that you're doing live from my drum room, and I'm going to start doing them in the next couple of weeks. And I was going to wait till we sort of got past the holidays and all that stuff. So I'm going to do some more of those. And so yeah, between this and that, we'll keep people hopefully entertained during these months.
That sounds great. Now, is the YouTube channel, is it under your name?
Yeah, I think if people search for me on YouTube, the link is this crazy weird. It doesn't have my name in it, but I think if someone searched for me on YouTube, or sorry, either that or if they Google searched me and put my name YouTube, I think maybe it would come up. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I'm in YouTube right now, and
okay, yeah. So if you
when I search YouTube and I put in John DeChristopher, one of the first things that shows up is the one with you and Steve Gadd and Rick Marotta. And then from there, you can just go right to the channel. Yeah, it is.
Perfect.
It's your name. So here's what it looks like, folks. John DeChristopher. Just go to his channel and subscribe and check out the live from my drum room, right?
Live from my drum. You can see I have a lot of subscribers, 270 subscribers.
I just hit 1,000
I'm laughing.
couple of weeks ago after 11 years or something. And I posted, I'm looking for followers because I want to be able to talk about the neuro and the rehab stuff I do. I want to be able to do it live on YouTube from a mobile device. And from a mobile device, you have to have 1,000.
Oh, you
more.
do? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to subscribe to you when we're done. I don't know if I do yet, so I'm
Oh,
going to do
thanks,
that.
man. Yeah, it's just uh it's my name with Carl with a K, I'm pretty sure. Um but it'll show up. And yeah, so if people subscribe there, for you, we get you more followers. We have to have people watching these, because this is history in the making, folks.
Oh,
Seriously, like Dom Famularo was saying in his sessions panel stuff. It I love that guy. My God, he's so much fun. And the energy, man. And
oh, I know. Yeah.
is he ever not smiling?
Infectious.
I
Yeah.
don't think he's ever not smiled. Even when he's playing and doing all this stuff, he's smiling. So it's really cool. So he says when he's long gone and he's in the grave, if somebody hears this stuff and it touches them, if it's one person, you know, that's kind of what my intention too. And it's not, I never even realized that is what it is, but that is what it is.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
doing this, you're sharing history, you're sharing knowledge and education and perspectives. And these people that you're dealing with and people I've had on, this is like a lesson in life in some cases, not just drums, not just music. And it's very valuable. Yeah, it's invaluable. You can't put a value on it.
Well, like I said when we were off the air, I said, if anything, COVID has kind of leveled the playing field for all of us,
Yeah,
and made people that might otherwise be sort of unapproachable or unattainable more
sure.
human, more attainable and approachable. So yeah, and I agree, and I'll just say that I have two grandkids, and they have no idea really what I used to do, because in their
Mhm.
lifetime I've been pops, their grandfather,
Sure.
who comes to visit every week, who plays the drums and has this wacky drum collection when they come to our house and they see all these drums. And
I
but
love it.
and a friend of mine, Bob DiLorenzo, said to me many times during one of our lunches that you've got to document this stuff, because you've got to be able to let them know what you've done. And it's not about, it sounds almost like I'm like I haven't cured cancer, I haven't solved any sort of you know problem in the world, but basically some sort of a legacy. And so it's a way to do that, and also hopefully lift people's spirits, make people happy during some tough times that we're having right now. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, check it out, everybody. Go to John DeChristopher in YouTube, and then he'll show up. Just subscribe. Go to the From My Drum Room playlist, and you'll see some really cool stuff.
Cool.
You know what's
Thanks,
funny
Carl.
is I'll let you go in a second. So the other a couple of weeks ago, I'm on and I see Grand Theft. I thought it said Grand Theft Auto. And first of all, I love that game. I'm thinking, well, maybe this is the guys and they're playing it, and we'll get to see some. I'm into it. I'm like, oh, they're talking about the band. This is just as cool. I mean, it was, but COVID brain had me, it left out the audio and put auto in place in my
Happens all the
mind.
time. No, it's okay.
No, it's cool though, and it's a catchy name, and it pulled me in, and I watched that particular episode, and I love it. It's great. It's
Well,
great. So
I'll just say we have a saying. It's we steal music, not cars. So
it's a fairly violent game, but I like it. I only play it when my son is around because he has it. I don't own it. So if he comes up and he's moving back here this fall, I'm so happy. And his wife says, I'm a grandpa too. Nora, my daughter's beautiful girl, lives about 5 miles away, 2.5
awesome.
months old, rolled over yesterday for the first time. It's just so
Oh,
cool to watch the
that's the
grandkids, right?
best.
And she's changed
Oh,
my life. Son's
yeah,
wife is expecting in April. He's a doctor. She's an NP. They'll come up and work here and live here. So I have the grandkids close. It'll be great. um yeah, so let's communicate. You and me will
yes, yep.
communicate about the next time. And again, no pressure at all, of course. But when we get to it, maybe we have a plan of some bullet points to hit on, and let it go organically at the same time. So
That sounds
appreciate
great.
you joining me. Thank you very, very much, John.
Thank you for having me, Carl. I appreciate it, and continue to feel better. I hope
Thank you.
every day gets a little better for you.
Yeah, for anyone out there, I did have COVID. If you follow my posts, I post updates not because I want any kind of empathy or sympathy, but just to let you know it can express itself in different ways. Mine was skin pain, neuropathy pain everywhere on my body. It's almost like I got baked in a
Wow.
broiler, or I was on a beach and I just never got off the beach in the sun, and I rolled over and got sun on that side, and I tested positive. Only had a fever for one day, but the brain fog is real. The post-COVID fatigue is real. Um, you know, if you don't believe in COVID, I'm sorry, it is a thing, and it's affecting a lot of
Yeah.
people. And mask up, be respectful of others, stay safe, and you don't want anyone, you don't want to get it, you don't want your family to get it or your loved ones. And that's
Right
just
on.
my little COVID rant, because most people, they're being, they get it and they're out there,
Yeah,
but there are
sure.
some who don't. And I understand, I have my wonders about certain things, but I'm not going to question it because I have it and whatever. So, but maybe next time we talk too, I'll have less brain fog.
I'm sure you will.
All right, man. Well, listen, thanks again, John. Really appreciate it. Great to
My
meet you.
pleasure.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for everybody who has been watching and the nice comments. This has been an honor for me, a privilege and a pleasure. And we'll see you all soon. John, I'll shoot you an email later, and
Okay.
I'll see you soon. Okay.
Got to go.
All right, my
All right,
friend.
man.
Thank you, everyone.
You too,
Take
buddy.
care.
Yep.
All right.
See you soon. Bye bye.
You too. Yep. Bye bye.